Strap in, my friends. We have a very special show today. Hamilton Souther from Blue Morpho Ayahuasca Center down in Peru is here, coming highly recommended by a variety of different people, most recent of which is one of my favorite recent on-it hires, Mr. Jason Havey, who's hanging out over there, who's had his mind blown by this center and, of course, by the Master Medicine, the mother. And so, you know, I know you've had a chance to speak with some of our good friends like Amber, but honored to have you here and mix it up with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's a real pleasure to be here and excited to get to share the story and, you know, keep spreading the word around something really special in this world.
For sure, for sure. So at some point you had the calling.
Yeah.
And you found yourself heading down south, presumably.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit of that, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, when I was year after I graduated from college, I started having spontaneous visions. And the visions were clearly spiritual in their origin. And I didn't have any explanation for them, but they continued. And within 6 weeks of the start of the visions, I was told that I would go to Peru and I would find this sort of prophesized apprenticeship and that I would become a Peruvian shaman, which for me sounded like, Twilight Zone.
So a lot of people, when they have a calling, it's not quite that literal.
Right. No, this was very literal, but I did not think this was going to come true, though. You have to understand. Like, I was like, whatever. This isn't going to come true. But I certainly went to Peru and it did come true. And so that made me have to think twice about what the universe was and what life was and what was happening, because I was just in my early 20s, so I was just kind of starting to embark on what we'd call adult life.
Yeah, that's I guess the calling comes to everybody in a different way, and
Sure.
I guess for you the universe was like, this dude needs it directly literal.
Yeah, literal. But I'd gotten to a point in my life where I was kind of like, where am I going? What am I doing? What is this? And I was certainly disenchanted and it had gotten a little dark and stuff like that. So I think I needed a literal wake-up call. And
Right.
I didn't have a background in spirituality or anything like that. I didn't really understand it. It didn't mean anything to me. And so, when you have these light beings talking to you, you then decide, whether you need help or whether they're real. You
Right.
decide that,
Yeah,
right?
You gotta make that
So I
choice.
figured I had to give them the benefit of the doubt. So I'd go to Peru, and if it didn't work out, then I'd just be quote unquote normal maybe or something.
Right.
But I ended up deep in the Amazon and in this tiny little river, a little community of 8 families, and with a guy and a bottle of ayahuasca. And so I ended up staying for a long time.
So that's that's not always the wisest way to go about searching for an ayahuasca experience, is just to head there blind and look for a guy with the bottle.
Definitely not a recommended way of going about it in this day and age.
Yeah,
we have
sure.
to think that 14, 15 years ago, it was
Climate was a little different.
very different. And the number of people looking for ayahuasca was very different, and those kinds of experiences. And it also wasn't just random. I mean, I had this deep spiritual connection. I had an ability to communicate with guides at that time, and I was being guided by them. And I was already told the specific guide I needed to find in Iquitos, and I found that guy.
By name or just by?
By name. I had a Lonely Planet guidebook, and the name was mentioned in the book, and it was every single time I went to look at the Amazon, the message was that guy, that guy, that guy,
Who was
no
that?
one else.
Can you share the name? Who was that guy?
It was a gentleman by the name of Moises Torres, who's now kind of retired, but he was the only jungle guide from Iquitos that guided into the area of the forest where I ended up apprenticing.
Right.
So it was very clear that I needed to find that guide, because that was the only guide that took people to where Don Julio Llerena Pinedo lived, who was the sort of grand elder that trained me.
Right.
And then it turned out that Alberto and Julio had visions for 10 years before my arrival that I would come. So they had been seeing it for a long time, that at some point this gringo guy was going to show up and stay, and so it was all very part of this very prophetic experience, and it was shared on both sides. And so I had to get to that location, which was, hundreds of kilometers from Iquitos, deep into the forest. And so there was only one guy who took, foreigners out there. So,
so inevitably when you experience enough plant medicine, it begins to reshape your paradigm and the rules by which you abide by.
Absolutely.
But you're talking about these things that allies were guiding you. You had these visions of these light beings.
Sure.
How did that fit in your existing framework before the plant medicine, and how has that been kind of shaped afterwards?
It didn't fit at all into my previous framework. My previous framework was born into a family of Western medicine. That was the beginning and the end of it. There was it was all science-based, math-based, very empirically based, and there was very little room for what would be seen as entirely personal experience or personal paradigms. It was all the collective, right?
Right.
And so when I went down there, there was just a tremendous amount of doubt, confusion, and I started to have to open up to a much kind of wider and broader view, which was, well, maybe, the other 6-7 billion people on the planet who know of this stuff and have experienced this and have culture with it and collective mythology aren't wrong. I kind of realized I might have been really arrogant in my youth, that there might be a whole lot more going on in the world than what I had initially, seen and understood. And then when I got into it, the pendulum swung the other direction. I started to see that was, this new paradigm and this new way of thinking and this new exploration of consciousness was where the real deep wisdom was and the real knowledge was. And then over the years from there, the pendulum has kind of swung back into the middle where it really does now hold both. And in that journey, I think for a period of time, I was really connected to this idea of, well, kind of who had it right, because there was this real dichotomy and this real opposition between modalities. And then I started to think something very different, which has been fueling my work now, which is that it's not about right or wrong or about who has their finger on the pulse, but it's about consciousness. And I see that consciousness gets shaped, and it really is the bridge of the entirety of our experience. And I got really fired up about how human consciousness shapes human experience and, what we can do to change the state of consciousness that we're in.
Your journey echoes a lot of, has a lot of similarities with my own. I mean, it first started with, you get this kind. For me, the visions didn't come before the plant medicine. It came kind of after that, and when I had that direct spiritual experience. And when I had the direct spiritual experience, I got really angry at the traditional paradigm that says you have to go through an intermediary in order to speak to source or speak to God. So I got really pissed at the desert religions that said, talk to your priest, and the priest will relay the message and then get the message and relay it back to you. And I'm like, what the hell is that system? You know that? And so, as I've gotten older though, then you start to kind of be able to bridge the value of all of these different traditions and kind of see a more temperate kind of viewpoint. But I think one of the greatest lies still ever told in the world is that people can't go out and find these truths themselves. They have to go look in a book, or they have to go talk to somebody else. The truths are there for everybody. And I think that's the very heart of this medicine and shamanism in general. It's, I'll show you, not tell you.
Yeah, first of all, the shaman is a guide. In visionary work and consciousness expansion, shamans are guides. And in traditional tribal societies, shamans are literally medicine men and medicine women, which means doctor. And so you have that real split between, what a doctor is in the Western world and what a doctor is in a tribal world. And this, I think, simplest difference is that in the tribal world, the doctors never separated mysticism and spirituality and spirit and energy from the kind of whole collective knowledge base or ensemble. And then you see, as you start to explore more and more and more, these incredible commonalities. These incredible commonalities in visionary experience, the wisdom and knowledge that you come into contact with, what happens to your mind as soon as you awaken the heart and the heart starts to open up and really becomes like a chalice that holds the mind and gives it stability and structure. And you start to see a real difference between the institution and the institutionalization of these incredible mystical truths and understandings about life. And you can be more open-minded and really pick from the different traditions what aspect of it speaks to you, and not have to fully take on the institution of it and all of the beliefs associated with that institution. And you start to see that, like you mentioned the term God. Well, from my understanding, that what that term means is an understanding found across every single religion and every single form of mysticism and every tribal society. They just have very different description for it, but the concept's there. That concept is ubiquitously expressed across the entirety of humanity.
Right, and it's just the connotation that freaks people out because
Sure.
it's been associated with so many different things depending upon the context from which it's been used.
Yeah.
You know, that's why you have to be careful with vocabulary because you say God to something.
Oh, and
you
it
say
means
God
something
to
totally
me, You say
different.
God to me at 22, and I'm like, go fuck yourself. I mean, I was angry at
Yeah,
that
sure.
kind of paradigm. Whereas,
Sure.
whereas now the vocabulary, as you said, doesn't bother me because my understanding it extends far beyond what any. I'm not in that context anymore.
Yeah, and
I'm
you
able
can-
to
you
apply
can-
my own context.
Yeah, and you can leave the context. And, when I see the great criticisms about the large spiritual or religious institutions, what is being criticized is the institution.
Totally.
And the practitioners in the institution. That's what seems to get criticized. And the other side of it is the push to try to make that institution strong. And what seems to be left out is the real mysticism within every single tradition, and it's there. It really is there. Yeah, like people can say whatever they want about any of the religions, but in all of the religions, there's a paradigm associated to what we would think of as duality or a dualistic construct, where there are opposing forces or opposing pieces, and you start to look at it, whether it's angels and demons, or it's yin yang, or it's light dark, or it's all Tao and flow. You start to see the commonalities, and what I would like to see, for people who are really curious and they're exploring and they would like to find these truths out for themselves, is to step away from the antagonism about all of it and really just get open.
Yeah.
Get really open and get really flexible and say, okay, I don't need to fight you over words and I don't need to fight you over meaning. We're exploring. And that was, I think, one of the benchmarks for me going down to Peru, is that it allowed me to be an explorer. The whole world's been like, the world has been traced with human feet now, footsteps everywhere, but the inner worlds of consciousness are entirely personal, and they're open for exploration for each individual. And you can't touch it unless you taste it and explore it yourself.
I think that is the most important message of all of this, is don't take anybody's word for it. Go out there and find it.
Please.
And that's why you see these shamans smiling over and over again, because they know what you're going to find for the most part.
Sure.
Like they know where it's heading, but they still won't tell you because they know if they told you it wouldn't matter anyways, you got to see it.
Yeah, it's thoughts and
feel
ideas. It's all thoughts and ideas, and it becomes theory, and then it becomes another group of opinions that everybody can debate.
Yeah.
But until you really get in there and you start to explore for yourself what any of these concepts mean and what any of these visionary experiences mean, it's just conjecture. And one of the things I loved about shamanism more than anything was that there was never an expectation to believe. There was only an expectation to experience. So once I started to apprentice and was accepted to apprentice, I didn't have the option to back out anymore. I didn't get take the night off. It was like, you're serious, but let's find out what you're serious about, not tell you what you have to be serious about.
And it takes it out of the realm of just, I believe this because I'm supposed to. I mean, when I talk about what happens after you die, I can speak about it with certainty. And sometimes people challenge me, how are you sure, bro? You're not dead. And I was like, look, I'm personally sure. I'm not going to be able to ever convince you to be personally sure, but I've seen what that dimension feels like. I've looked at it. I've felt it. I know it's there, and I'm 100% confident personally that other dimension exists across the threshold of the transition. But if I hadn't been there and felt it and seen it, I would never have that kind of
Absolutely.
confidence.
And when I look at that kind of a concept, and we talk about something that is so intense as death, the very first thing I always think of is, wouldn't that be entirely personal? It's going to speak to you. It's not speaking to anybody else, right? Everybody at the funeral's alive except for the one guy who's dead. So that experience has to be entirely personal. And then we don't even know what parts die other than just the body. We know the body goes into stillness and then, decomposes as it was constructed. But the experience beyond that, and that's where I always go back to consciousness, shows us the infinite. It shows us the eternal. Time's different. It shows us the emotional, completely different. Shows us the connected, completely different. Shows us the multidimensional, completely different. And so for those of people like you who've had that experience, you can speak with certainty on it because you've crossed the rainbow bridge, you've crossed the bridge of consciousness, you've gone to the non-physicality of consciousness, you've experienced the eternal of consciousness, and the awareness that you don't lose identity, but you lose identification along the way. Like,
beautifully said.
You're still you. I mean, it's like completely
just the best fucking version of you.
The best version of it. It's the cleanest, like, most truthful, most loving, most aware, most open, most incredible.
And so happy, and that's another thing. I've had other experiences with other really powerful plant medicines, one of which was Iboga with a 10th generation Bwiti shaman, and really went deep in that, where I was able to speak to the consciousness, the essence of consciousness of people both alive and dead. And that's an interesting part of the paradigm. But the interesting thing to me about that is you think of like we have this Western conception of ghosts, and it's ooh, and it's all like that. These people were cracking jokes, that we were laughing. It was like the very best iteration of their personality and identity. And when we were done talking, they would screw around with me. Some of them would flip me off, like, hey, stop talking to me. We're done here, And to see the vibrancy of that spark of consciousness and the joy and the love that was emanating was really something that was special and will always kind of stick with me.
Yeah, when the human body is the core rooted location of consciousness, there's all of the separation between everybody that is perceived but not real. Right? It's perceived, but it's not real. Like between you and me right now, air's connecting us, table's connecting us, floor's connecting us, chair, matter, concept, auric fields. There's all these things connecting us, but it seems so separate. As soon as you can shed that concept of separation, you're instantly awakened to a greater understanding and a greater connectivity with everything around us. And that's what the shamans really explore.
Right.
They're just looking at how everything's connected and what it all means, and what you can do with it and how you can help people with it and what kind of medicine you can practice and how you can expand consciousness.
And then once you understand that we're all like cells in a single organism, and that's when you can really, when you make that clear, then you realize what your true agenda is. It's okay. Yeah. You got to keep your own cell healthy, because you're part of the organism. You got to keep the cells you directly touch, maybe your family, these close friends. But for those of us who have the ability to communicate to a larger part of the body and make that healthy, of course we got to do that. We're all part of this same organism, just separated, as you say, by our own constructs in our mind.
Yeah, I think if humanity could collectively understand that the trajectory and transit of life in time is very, very short, even though it seems when you're in it very long, like 60, 70, 80 years seems long. And when you're a kid, I mean, an hour can seem like forever. Yeah. But if you look at sort of, whenever we want to call the origin point of time until now, there's a ton of it out in the universe, like this huge amount of time. And that as an expression of consciousness, that eternal notion of our being really just got started in this life. And as soon as we shed the rest of it, and I don't mean it in the form of having to physically die, but shed these like perception barriers between all of us, we can start to see that very same consciousness that we're talking about that you find in plant medicines is happening in the normalcy of our daily life. We're just cut off from it.
Sure.
And then we can get to start to get to like that really amazing paradigm that life can be on a global level or a humanity-based level, where people are actually seeing that we are one humanity. They can see beyond the differences, beyond the cultures, beyond the races, and see like, we're all experiencing the exact same core architecture of life. Like conception birthed us into cells birthed us into little bodies, and we've been cruising the earth ever since trying to figure it out, And like that aspect of it alone right there really to me is a deep, humbling experience to understand that there is one single collective story we're all figuring out together.
Yeah, it's like collectively we form the one source, that life force, that creation. And when I look about, sometimes you wonder like, well, what's the purpose of working so hard to improve consciousness? Well, it's like the more collectively we form the mood of God, like, is God happy or is God frustrated and pissed off and sad,
Sure.
Like collectively, if we all elevate, then the whole mood of the collective improves. And so it's like that the organism is happier, healthier, stronger. And
Absolutely. I look at humanity as a single collective, and I look at it as a single ancestry and a single timeline. And I don't really know. I mean, I studied anthropology, so 150, 160,000 years ago, we have archaeological record of the first Homo sapiens sort of walking the earth and stuff. And I see this continuous timeline ever since then. And that what really separated Homo sapiens from all of the other kinds of organic life is on Earth was that we had this awakening to consciousness. We have an understanding of our own consciousness, a self-identified version of the consciousness, a collective version of the consciousness. And so what we're really talking about is the nexus of the mind and the imagination and the emotions and physicality to actually do something, to affect consciously and know it. And so to me, the whole game now is consciousness.
Yeah,
We've played out the physical game, ad infinitum, technological revolutions, to this incredible explosion of digital revolution, information technology everywhere. And so it's like, well, now what? Now what do we do? And it's like, well, the evolution of consciousness and the work to evolve consciousness becomes truly the next human operating system. It can redefine physics. It can redefine technology. It can redefine health and wellness. It can redefine, what you guys are into with total human optimization. It can redefine what a mind is and what a brain is. And I don't see any reason why we don't understand that we're on the cusp of that next evolution. Like this is the moment in human history. To me, it's the most exciting time in human history ever.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're very close to starting to actually build those physical bridges to these consciousness and other concepts. Already like the science about the power of belief is coming out.
Sure.
So you're having books like by Joe Dispenza and these different books, You Are the Placebo, talking about these amazing stories about the placebo and the nocebo effect, how the mind alone can cure an incurable disease or actually create an incurable disease.
Sure.
And just documented cases of this. So we're starting to find these connections where thoughts, interpret to matter. But then it starts to get even more interesting in the quantum physics level, where the observation of a certain thing will create the outcome of a certain thing, the observer effect in quantum physics.
Absolutely.
And then I think we're even on the cusp of finding out even more links. I've been really interested in the results of that particle accelerator that they've had going in Europe, and they're looking for what they call the God particle, that Higgs boson particle. And so a lot of people were thinking that the Higgs boson was going to come in at a weight of 115 units, and that was like the conventional theory, right? And they didn't even know if it existed, but if it did, that made everything make sense. And some other factions thought it would come in at 140, which meant it was a multiverse. And so they actually ran the thing, and nobody thought it was going to be anything in between. They ran the thing, and it came out as an average between the two. And I was like, that's very curious.
Sure.
It just makes me wonder if that particle isn't some direct link, like that nexus point where belief translates into matter. And so the collective belief of what it is, it's like, oh, what does everybody believe it is? Oh, 126, cool. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Like I think we're on the cusp of, and that's kind of like a radical theory that would be rejected by every quantum physicist now. But at some point, I think we'll actually start to find the science to blend with this spirituality, because as above, so below. I mean, these rules are going to have their footprints in the physical world just as they are in the spiritual world.
Yeah, the work that we're doing right now with the Blue Morpho Foundation and sort of our expansion into the modern world, because, I lived in the Amazon for 12 years straight, just practicing traditional Amazonian ayahuasca shamanism, is to take the mystical knowledge that we've amassed and actually apply science to it and apply math to it. And we're in the process right now of creating a coalition of astrophysicists and particle physicists to be able to start to mathematically model the mysticism and bring mystical understanding into hard science.
Yeah, because the connection will be there, and that I agree with you. That's going to be the real revolution. Just as the clinical studies that have been done on psilocybin and MDMA have allowed those medicines and marijuana, the medical kind of research that has come out, have allowed those to become accepted by mainstream society and start to proliferate. Yeah. I mean, the train is on the tracks for legalization of these things because of the scientific method, which has been our predominant religion in our culture. I mean, that is the religion that everybody ascribes
Western
to.
science, certainly.
So we've applied these so-called mystical and these drugs, these psychedelic drugs to that. And all of a sudden people are accepting it. Oh yeah, mushrooms. I heard that's really good for end of life care. Oh yeah, there's that study by Johns Hopkins. And oh yeah, MDMA. Yeah, it's great for PTSD. And then all of a sudden people's minds start to open. And I think when we start to make the connections like you're working on making, where it starts to tie into more of these phenomena, it's just going to really open up people's minds to a truth that has been, forgotten by most people.
Yeah, I think the sacred plants are so important in that because, through the work that we've done at Blue Morpho, we've had people from 60, 70, 80 countries from around the world come, and 48 of the 50 states have come to our center from every single background and walk of life. And so we've had these MDs and PhD doctors coming to us over and over and over again, looking to extend not only their own understanding of the universe, but their own work. And all of a sudden we have this watering hole, this meeting point somewhere in the world around this understanding of exploring consciousness in conjunction with these plants. And it's bringing together people that never would have sat around a table together. And in this case, it's not even a table. It starts in a great circle in a very ancient traditional way where everybody's dropping these, cloaks of sort of modernity and saying, okay, I'm here, I'm present, I'm a big bundle of energy. Where is this going to take us all? And then the next days, the conversation gets to become something that really more is coalition based and, sharing ideas and crossing these gaps that you would never see, in other places.
Yeah. It's funny. You talk about sitting around in a circle and, we had never spoken before this podcast. And, we find that we're sharing so many similar ideas, but you find that in almost every ayahuasca circle you have, unless someone's really trying to put on a show or something. And there's a rare circumstance where you'll find that where they want to have an experience that will impress people or something like that. I've seen that occasionally. But for the most part, if people are telling the truth, I've never had anybody go around with the talking stick or however you do it and describe their experience and be like, what? No, that doesn't make any sense. It's like everybody comes to truths that inherently sit well as and congruent with the same paradigm. It's a wild phenomenon, whereas no matter who they are, no matter what background they come from, when they share their experience, you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think in that case, what we're getting is a group of people to sit down and agree to some core similarities to life.
Right.
And when I look at modern society and the modern lives we live, I see that most modern people were born into incredible stability in those core sort of vectors. And so you have, relative physical health and well-being. Like I always say to people who are fairly sick, focus on the 80, 90% of you that's really healthy, because that's where we're going to find that movement. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the mind, same thing with the emotion, same thing with the imagination. And when you come to something like ayahuasca and those kinds of experiences, you already know you're going to those places. You're going to your understanding within you of these core aspects of just what it is to be a human being. And modern society's floats above that. They just take all of that for granted and then live within a psychic state where you don't have to really worry about those concepts. You're not really worried about your physical survival. You're not really worried about how you're going to come out of one day to the next mentally or emotionally, or you're not, typically in that moment coming to this point where in 4 or 5 hours you're looking to do 10, 20 years of psychological processing. And so when you're coming to that, it makes everybody, well, not everybody, but almost everybody get really real, really deep inside themselves and just say here we are. And at Blue Morpho, I used to love watching that. The first day, everybody was pantomiming their own existence.
Right.
Literally acting it out, right? Nerves were up, anxious, they're literally in their physical expressions, acting out what's going on. And by day 3, they would just be so relaxed in the chair, talking, sharing, expressing, and that whole mask of personality and sort of layer upon layer upon layer of this psychological competitiveness for the space and who's going to have the greatest experience and competition, all that was neutralized to a point where everybody's just really, really in their skin. Yeah. Grounded, present, saying I had a big experience last night.
Yeah.
That really rocked my world. I don't even know how I'm going to integrate it, or
sure.
After that. And I always thought that's something very special.
It is very special. And what's also special is that there's people who inherently, I've seen it in many different groups, inherently completely dislike each other upon initial meeting. You know, it's like, I can't fucking stand that guy. It drives me crazy. And, you know, there's people like that out in the world. It's like a microcosm for the world. But you go through ceremony like this and you share this sacrament. And all of a sudden, by the end, you know, the hugs between every single person are real. You know, whatever differences, yeah, they may still not be the person you invite over for Thanksgiving. But nonetheless, there's a mutual respect and kind of, it's just a whole different vibe that comes from that. And it's just makes me think that out to our society as a whole, we're missing ceremony from our life in general. We're missing that ability to bond with people over something as important as this. It wouldn't necessarily have to be plant medicine, but
sure.
The importance of ceremony to kind of bridge these gaps and break down these judgments and barriers that we have is so important. And plant medicines are definitely one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah, ceremony is something certainly missing in modern society. I think it didn't have a lot of space in Western scientific thought, like you mentioned, sort of the proliferation of the concepts of Western science. Mm-hmm. And then you look at just the way people treat the idea of ceremony and how difficult it is, like planning a wedding or something, like what people think of as their most important day of their life. And, you know, you got bridezilla shows on TV and stuff. Like you can't just have a ceremony, right? Like what is that aspect of the expression of human consciousness and a kind of human gathering to have it not be weird, to have it just be completely normal? Like, for me at first, it was a little bit weird. I would sit with this tremendous anxiety before quote unquote ceremony out in the jungle and stuff, and you hear the cacophony of all the sounds and the animals, and the jungle comes to life, and you're sitting there going like, okay, like the engines are revving for the Indy 500, it's just gonna happen. And then it started after years to become really relaxed, and it's like, well, all we're doing is ceremony. Like we're always in ceremony. You know, I do probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 ceremonies a week of different kinds, just to be in that state of consciousness and to keep that continuity and flow of openness and the expression of our energy and sort of that vitality that we get from that experience. And I think that, you know, the message is ceremony is natural. It's natural.
Yep.
It's natural to revere life. We revere life.
Yeah, and the ones, unfortunately, you touched on, I mean, the ones that we do have become increasingly hollow, really, of actual genuine meaning. I mean, think about the most important two, weddings and funerals, really. Yeah. You know, and so everyone, you know, bridal shower or bar mitzvah or put anything, birthday, anything like that. And it's really about gifts, show, drinking. You know, it's about things that really have absolutely nothing to do with real ceremony, you know, for the most part. I mean, there's some tender moments that can happen in a wedding, but it's not really designed to magnify that necessarily. It's just kind of like it happens because the union is special, if it is special. Otherwise, it's just like, man, what the hell is this?
Yeah, but, you know, look at the paradigm that we have in Western society where in like this incredible developed, incredibly wealth, incredible expression of technology, we've also been taught you will never be real. Like, never be real. Never just show up and be yourself. Do not do that. If you do that, you are going to get kicked, spit on, bullied, hurt, worked. Like, no one is supposed to just be themselves. There's no space for an individual to just be who they are in like this collective fear-based mindset. And so how are we supposed to come and just relax and be together as people and have enough space around us and enough respect around us to let everybody be themselves and see that there's no reason for all of those fears? Yeah. You know, if we can't get past that, how are we going to be able to have ceremony? Because everybody's going to be peacocking and primping and sitting and adjusting and like, you know, faking the facial expressions and communicating smokescreen the whole time. Sure. And again, going back to the sacred plant medicine, they tear that down. Yeah. Like, just tear it down. Yeah. You know, instantly. Like, instantly. Yeah,
you're going to be shitting in front of people. You're going to be puking in front of people. Eventually, you don't give a shit what you're wearing. No. You know, all of these things that you formerly thought are just like, they're gone.
Yeah, because there is this commonality, and that's where we find ceremony. And so that's something that we can be mindful of and conscious of and continue to share and support other people getting into. And I've been really working with that because ceremony is so important to our lives. and it's so common, in the cultures where I learned all of these different techniques and methodologies to explore consciousness, and then coming back here, confronting that sort of vibe around ceremony and weirdness around ceremony, and like people not really sure how to be. And so I've really started exploring just playing games as ceremony. Yeah. Like different kinds of conscious exploration games, because we're used to playing games, and it's something fun that we
monkeys
do.
Like games.
We love games, right? We love pick up sticks, jacks, cards, whatever.
Yeah.
And so if we could have games that really opened consciousness and really helped us get comfortable with each other, it could be a great way to be able to, introduce again the concept of ceremony to the West.
I think that's really important. And even gamifying, there's this new app and technology. It's called the Muse, and it's a portable EEG device that you put on your head that measures your brainwaves.
Nice.
And then it's hooked to an app that gives you biofeedback to when you're in a calm meditative state. So you focus on your breathing, you can count your breaths or whatever your practice is. And then, so when you're calm, by reading the brainwaves, the screen gets calm, and it's a sunny day, and there's birds will start chirping if you do well. And if you're really, really calm, a bird will land on you and it'll sound like you got headphones in. And then when you get distracted, the storms will blow in and wind will go. But the whole time, at the end of the day, you get a reading of how much time you spent calm, how much time. So you get a point score and how many birds and whatever. And I think this has incredible potential because it gamified, meditation.
Sure.
Not only is it giving biofeedback, which is really important, but you're getting points. So it's this addicting thing. Like, ooh, man. Because they brought it out at this place called Summit Series, which is a bunch of entrepreneurs. And it was funny because everybody was going around and everybody was trying to out-meditate each other. And I was like, what was your score? How many birds you get, bro? And even me, like, I knew how silly it was, but I had a good session, and I couldn't help but being a little bit like, oh, yeah, one bird, huh? Okay, cool. I got 4. And I would try and stop that, Aubrey. That's silly. That's crazy. You can't do that. You can't be proud about meditating this person. But we're so wired to this competition and game that instead of just completely denying that, but helping people with like a little foot in the door and saying, hey, let's have some fun with it. I think it's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, I think having fun with it's key. If it's not fun, we're not going to do it very long.
Right.
We already do enough things in our life that's not fun.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how many people really like their jobs? Like, really like, oh, man, that's fun. Like, oh, it's so fun every day. Oh, fun. Oh,
people hear it on it, Hamilton.
That is something very true.
Uh-huh.
I walked around your facility, and I have to say the overall mood and vibe here is pretty special. I might hit you up for a job after this. I might be like, hey, I think I want to stay in Austin.
Maybe I can go to Peru, and you can take my job for a while. I'm pretty sure you got this.
We can get on Oprah and do a role reversal thing, right?
Yeah, we can do switch it.
We'll do the switcheroo and see how it all goes.
Yeah, I'm in. We'll just swap around. We'll be like, how like Dr. Manhattan had other avatars you could work with to like work on different stuff?
That would actually be really fun because we could see how after all of this training, how the psyche stacks up to like 120 ceremonies, of Aya in a year and see how it holds.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we've watched people, when they come to train, and this is also for the people. I get so many, emails and stuff and Facebooks and things like that about people asking about apprenticeship. Like, if you really want to learn, you got to get ready to have your head be in this game because it's 120 ceremonies of, really hardcore mind-bending experiences in a year after year after year after year after year. Yeah, I drank ayahuasca for over 10 years.
I'm out. I retract my desire to switch with you.
Right? Like we
keep that. That's good.
We do that. Like, how you have like out there the board with everybody's stats on it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how it gets. You're like, oh yeah, another 100 ceremonies, another 100 ceremonies, another 100 ceremonies, and so it'd be fun to see how we could see how we withstand that environment, right?
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, that it's a way to kind of temper the steel, to a certain degree.
Absolutely.
It's tempering the steel of the psyche. It's putting the sword in, folding it, hammering it.
Yeah.
And a lot of swords would break in that kind of heat. And so generally the idea of what you do at your center and what the good centers do is they give you just enough heat so that the sword doesn't shatter, but enough that it'll allow you time to refold and get stronger and then come back and integrate,
Sure.
Get that time and then another turn back in the fire, to get stronger, to get sharper, and to be more prepared for your life.
Yeah, 24 hours later.
Yeah.
At our center, we, in a week we'll do 5 ceremonies, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's absolutely a lot. But I've been working. I studied in the traditions, and with two incredible master shamans that had, long lineages and all this, what I consider to be like really blessed experiences. And then I kept looking at ayahuasca and seeing that there's this issue of volatility and safety and concern around that. And then in my own explorations of consciousness, I started to look at universal expressions. And I developed this methodology called the Blue Morpho Way that sets the space for ayahuasca all in 9 universal definitions of human consciousness. And when I first took it there about 5-6 months ago, I developed it outside of ayahuasca with the work that I was doing in the States. I wanted to see if ayahuasca would destroy it or if ayahuasca would support it.
So you set up kind of like a codification, a paradigm of sorts that you want.
Yeah, I've codified human consciousness in 9 universal definitions.
Okay.
They apply to every single human being at every single moment of life once all of the pieces come online. So from embryonic stages until sort of what we would consider to be full human capacity. Once that's formed, I within mystical terms, codified it. What I want to do now is turn it into mathematical forms. But what it did to ayahuasca was something that I couldn't even believe the results. The ayahuasca completely overlaid to the structure. So we set it up inside the ceremony, and for those who are like real mystic nerds out there, like I am, it's called the medicine world, and it starts if you modeled a universe in numbers of pieces. So it's like, what does the universe look like at 1? What does the universe look like at 2 pieces? What does the universe look like when there's 3 pieces? What does it look like when there's 4 pieces? And it changed ayahuasca. And I'd never seen anything touch ayahuasca. I mean, shamans, when they're in really in ceremony and you have a big group and there's a lot of purging, 50, 60, 70% of your energy is just going to keep in the room contained, And all of a sudden, the whole space of ayahuasca could completely relax. Like ayahuasca relaxed. It was incredible.
So you're actually setting up some kind of diagram on the ground, or
no? It's the ayahuasca shamans get very, very good at holding abstract consciousness concepts as normal, real states. But I mean, I have written it out on paper, and we've drawn it.
You're holding this energetically,
but we hold it energetically, and we hold it together psychically. We share it with the group. We share it with the group, and then we hold it within our own consciousness, and it awakens a universal state of human consciousness, which doesn't then have to be held. All the comparative states dance in light inside your brain, and so you have to dance with them, and you learn in ayahuasca to move really quickly,
right?
To be able to keep it all together, and because it's such a vast amount of information, right? And this made it all incredibly still and calm, and it allowed the transformation inside ayahuasca to be accelerated. So, before you're like, okay, it's a common sort of thing people have said, like 10 years of, counseling in one night of ayahuasca, like that. Now it can be like 20, 30, 40 years.
So it's a
like
magnifier,
accelerator of it, but through a kind of stability and contained expression within the ceremony itself, which allowed for a much greater expression of the movement of consciousness.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, if you're thinking of ayahuasca as an energy source, and that energy is splaying out in all different directions, like a bad connection in your light socket, where its sparks are fizzling out, and you're this master electrician, like, come on, we gotta get this through there, and then you find the right converter there that can just take that energy at that voltage without frying the system, and then apply it so that it really transmutes the transformation. I mean, it makes sense theoretically, absolutely.
We got to go experience it.
I'm in.
We have to go experience this. And so, this just happened in the last year. And for me, it was revolutionary. I mean, super revolutionary to something like the practice of ayahuasca, because there had always been this, what I call inside-outside concerns, like bad stuff coming in. What do you do with the stuff getting purged? All of that. And the system allowed us a way to work that just neutralized all of those concerns so that the experience can have, naturally much less fear, much less anxiety, much less concern, and can be safer and also, more effective at healing.
Yeah. That's interesting you mentioned that, because that's one of the issues that I have with a lot of ayahuasca shamanism is the obsessive concern of, oh, this person's throwing darts and there's this force. And I mean, and it can get to this point where it's like a video game almost.
It is like, it can play itself out very much like, you know, only where your collateral in the game is your skin.
Right. And then that never really sat that well with me, is like, you know, for whatever reason, I knew that there was a better way. You know, I didn't fully ever buy into it completely, although I understand the true importance of a sacred space and having it contained. But it would just get to these proportions where it'd be like, okay, come on now, guys. You know, this is strong medicine. Let's sit in, let's be in a safe, contained space, and let's allow the medicine to do its work. Don't be so scared of everything coming in. And I think so many people, when they're in that paradigm, they have so much fear because they think something, this thought that they have, which they just need to purge naturally and relax. They think it's some demon or something that's attacked them. And so I think I really like the way that you're describing is like, look, let's set this in motion and
then be done with that
Be done with that whole side.
Yeah. You know, that was a real perplexing question to me early on because I came from California and, you know, occult practices, not like on the open radar. You're not hearing about people doing spells and weird things like that all the time. You get down to the Amazon and it's like, hello, this is the part of the culture, you know. And then I started to look at it really kind of from an anthropological background of like, well, why does this exist? And then I got deep into the tribal societies. And this is also, you know, not a warning to people, but a disclaimer, like, think about the cultures and what the cultures believe in and what the cultural paradigms are of the people that you go take, you know, visionary medicines with, because it's where they're coming from, right? It's where they're coming from. And the tribal societies that developed ayahuasca practices, and I pay a lot of respect and homage to the ancient traditions, they also didn't understand pathogenic illness. They only thought of psychomagical or mystical illnesses. There's deep competition within the tribes. They were war-based tribes, headhunting tribes, and they developed these, you know, traditions also with the medicine. So there's a lot of coloring of those belief systems into, you know, the traditional ayahuasca practices.
And
they're not reflective.
And power itself.
Absolutely.
You know, the medicine men were some of the most powerful people in that tribe.
Absolutely.
So, and power is a force.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they were. I mean, they were either the doctors of the tribe, they were the tribal leaders, or they're the ones who are giving, you know, advice to the tribal leaders. So right there, you can already see the balance of power. Taking all of that into consideration, you know, our safety is important, but we need to understand, you know, that we don't need to go down to the Amazon and get caught up in all of that.
Yeah.
Right. That's not why we're there. Right. And I see a lot of people get caught up in all that. I used to be, you know, very cautious with people. I tell them, like, be really careful because you don't really know where these people are coming from, or, you know, they're not coming for the same reasons. Like when I first lived in the Amazon, out where I lived, there were like full-blooded natives where Spanish was a second language to them. And there were also mestizo shamans. And they were the Matzes cat people. They were really interesting people. Really interesting people. It's really interesting to know a group of people that do not share the same common law structure as you. Like inside you, when you just sit across the table and look at them, you know, they are not being controlled by any of the same concepts of law. They're not thinking that way.
Yeah,
right?
Your energy, you're like a little, woo.
Yeah, no, I remember this is an aside, but it's a story worth telling. I remember when the Peruvian guys, you know, and these are like frontiersmen, right? They're telling me, be careful with those guys. Right? The frontiersmen guys are like, and I'm already like being careful with the frontiersmen guys, right? They're the ones going, hey, be careful with those guys. Those guys aren't like us, you know. We're like chill. Those are those guys, right? You know, and so I just think that let's not be scared about all of this stuff. Let's not be concerned about these questions, but let's also be smart about how we're gonna you know, think about using this visionary medicine. And there's all this stuff out there about, do you need a shaman? Do you not need a shaman? Is there danger? Is there not danger? Is there all of these concerns or not? Let's get really focused on why we're there. We're there for medicine.
Right.
It's the only reason why we're there. Medicine is used to learn and also heal. So you learn from the medicine and you also heal with the medicine. And so that's why we're there. And, you know, after dealing with all that stuff for a long time, I wanted a solution. And so I developed my own solution. I didn't want to deal with, you know, angry people all over the world being competitive in psychomagical ways or even physical ways. Like, you know, I kind of realized that there's a lot more efficiency and peace. It's just a lot more efficiency.
Totally. And instilling a strong sense of self-reliance. You know, I mean, if you get so caught up in these outside forces, that was I gained a lot from working with Alberto Violda's group when I went down there initially. But, a criticism I had of his school of practice, and, he does great things, all respect to him for doing what he started. But he has a belief in, and you can read about it in his book, Shaman, Healer, Sage. He has a belief system where these energies get stuck in you and you need somebody else to extract them for you, right? Yeah. So constantly when I was down there with his group, they were in constant need of help. I mean, we'd be in ayahuasca ceremony and it'd be like popcorn popping up, like, help me, Maestro, help me. Because in their mind, they had instilled the belief system that things get stuck that they can't remove themselves, that they need somebody else to extract. And just that belief system, it shook their own self-reliance and their ability to really transform with the medicine, because their belief system made that in effect true. Whereas
absolutely.
If they rewound that belief system and said, no, I'm going to be fine. I'm a being made of light. I'm a being made of light, made of diamonds. What's going to hurt me? I'm
right.
Invincible. I'm in the house of my father's source. I'm an invincible being in existence for a blink of a time. What's going to hurt me? You have that attitude in there, and then you allow nothing's going to stick.
You're a Teflon.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like cosmic Teflon.
Exactly. And that's what's so important. And even I've seen this over and over again. Like people will get afraid of these other external forces where I know that, look at yourself as this being of light that's invincible, and you are that thing, and you can go through these things
absolutely
that way. And I think it's important to, to not get caught up in that other paradigm where you're giving away your own protection and self-reliance.
Yeah, I mean, what we do at our center now, and part of the Blue Morpho Way and our medicine world work, is to understand that the universe as a whole represents all of it, like literally all of it at once, not differentiated. And that undifferentiated point we call love. We call it like this sublime grace that is, completely supportive and completely guiding. And then we say, check out your body. Your body's made up of it. And then check out your mind. Your mind's made up of it. And then check out your feelings. Your feelings are made up of it. And check out your imagination. Your imagination's made up of it. So sure, we can encounter all of these different kinds of beings and all of these different mind forms and projections and, incredible dimensions and, honeycombing universes and filled just teeming with life and spirit and all this stuff. And always remember that when you're there, if you need to release something, if you need to purge something, you need to let something go, remember the love right there and just hand it over right there. Don't try and find it somewhere else. If you find it in your knee, that's where the healing medicine and love already is. So just connect the two and then it's gone. And, we teach people how to do that themselves so that they can be self-reliant, so that they're not relying on us.
I think that's incredibly important. So what is it about DMT in particular, because I'm sure we haven't talked about it, but I'm sure you've had experience with a lot of plant medicines. There's another another bridge that's built that DMT creates. It's a little bit different than everything else. The other things can get you to some amazing places, but there's something about that particular molecule that allows a certain type of access that's unique.
But, we think of that molecule as the light switch. Mm-hmm. And so, imagine if you could flick a light switch to the entirety of your consciousness and at the same time, talking about that bridge, recognize your own consciousness as the bridge, like a true nexus, a coming together of the entire universe coalesced in your own being, and that there's no separation at all, and you can flick a light switch through that and see the entirety of your energetic makeup, that your consciousness could and your mind could fully comprehend your atomic makeup. It could fully comprehend your molecular makeup. It could fully comprehend your cellular makeup. It could fully comprehend every single synapse path through the brain, and that you yourself could rewire your brain from all the different problems that you're having, to otherwise. And clearly the molecule of DMT is purposeful in that. It's purposeful in that, auto-produced by the body itself. So I think that molecule is a molecule that's directly related to human consciousness and the turning on of light in human consciousness. And there's so much fear around all this stuff in the world. Like, I just don't see the need for there to be so much fear, but I also see the need for there to be a tremendous amount of responsibility in the exploration of these chemicals and like how we can use them to really better ourselves and better humanity. But I just see the molecule as a capacity to really not only, awaken the whole brain to work together, it also then lets you kind of find that place of nexus, that center point within you that then allows you to see the light of the whole universe and then navigate it, and to be able to see that your body's made up of that exact same energy, and your mind's made up of, and that your big toe is made up of the same stuff as your thoughts, and getting that real holistic view on what we are, and being able to experience it, not just have it be scientific theory, but really be able to experience our own scientific theory.
Well, you end up feeling it a lot of times before you can even verbalize it.
Yeah.
Like the vocabulary, like, I don't know, but I felt this thing.
Yeah.
And then as you talk about it and kind of think about it more, but a lot of times our words simply fail because words are tied to ideas that you can, that make sense clearly,
Yeah, language is a fascinating tool in its own right. If you think about a being having language, because it's entirely symbolic. Mm-hmm. You're taking something entirely etheric, which is a concept, and now you're going to give a grouping of symbols meaning, and then you're going to combine those symbols into a new symbol that has new meaning made up of those symbols itself. So if you keep digging at it, you keep pulling the thread and take it into Aya, anybody who wants to really play with this one, you're never going to get anywhere. Like you're going to keep pulling and you're going to get another symbol and another symbol and another symbol. And, and so I look at that as being one really finite expression of how human beings perceive, think, and express. And that if we look at, the origin, like the epicenter or the origin of these incredible experiences we have, why not have them come through feeling first, or come through a hunch, or come through intuition, or come through the body,
or come through vision,
vision. Yeah,
these
absolutely.
visual. It's almost like information in its raw form is coming and it's splashing against this field that ignites them into all of these colors and this kaleidoscope. But this raw information hits this force field of existence, of physicality, and it hits our brain, and we get these visions and these colors and things, and then we have to then retranslate that back into symbols so that our brain can process it. Yeah. It's a really remarkable thing, and some puzzles will always remain. This information that hits our perception, and we get it and go, well, I got nothing on that one, but I understood this one. That made sense.
No, and I loved it. We would have people on every group that would come down, and for people who've seen the ayahuasca art, it's these tremendously intricate patterns and often very colored and stuff like that. And you have some here in the studio. And some people would come from it and be like, all I saw were colors and patterns. And other people would be like, oh my God, I saw divine architecture. I saw the fabric of space-time. And for me, all those colors and patterns, just like you're saying, are information.
Yeah.
Right? They actually are information. And if you spend enough time in there, you can learn to read them.
Yeah.
You can learn to speak that language, and that's what the language of Ikaro is. Mm-hmm. The language of Ikaro is a system of sacred communication between the plant energies and the human energies through that membrane of these shapes, colors, and patterns that allow a pure communication that doesn't have to then be translated. And it's a vibratory language instead of symbolic.
Would it be valuable to, put this all down in a book like The World According to Ayahuasca, which is really actually the world according to truth, but would it be valuable, or is it just something that, let's just let everybody go down there, see it, feel it for themselves? Because I often wonder if that makes sense, if that would be helpful or if that wouldn't be helpful.
Well, we could contact the author of the For Dummies series.
Send him through 100 days of ceremony. And see.
I don't know. In all fairness to it, there's a certain amount of theory that I think is valuable, and I think it's very limited. Yeah. And I think beyond that, it really does require the personal experience. I think that there's room to be able to translate the experiences and transliterate them into an expression of knowledge that could be very beneficial to people outside of the use of the plants themselves. So if we took it one step further, very similar to what you guys are doing here, in terms of concept.
Yeah.
Right? Like the combination of these pieces allows a human being to now experience something so much greater for themselves in their own life, right?
Yeah.
So if we could take the knowledge, utilize the knowledge in a new way, in a new form of packaging or a new new presentation for people, I think that has a tremendous amount of merit, and that's something that I'm already working on.
Great.
But the idea of just, you can talk about it forever and try to understand it forever, but we really are babies in that world, and we need to take our first steps.
So what are the first steps before, besides heading down and, booking a trip to Peru and having this? Like what in your mind are the modalities that you recommend for people to start taking these baby steps?
Like if they're going to go down or
well, just in general, access greater consciousness.
To access greater consciousness. That's a really, really good question. I think if I had to simplify it the most, it would be turn to the universe. Mm-hmm. Turn to the whole universe at once. Just turn to it. Like you've been turned to inside your brain and inside your feelings and inside your thoughts and inside your theories and inside what's going on your phone, and turn to the whole universe at once. And then just say, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Okay. We've done enough of, micro, cut off. Just come to that moment in your life where you turn to the universe and say, I'm ready, and now let's be gentle, because this is the whole universe, right? This is my whole life we're talking about. We're not talking about just an aspect of it or anything. Let's start there. Let's start with that rebirth moment where, when you came out of the womb onto Earth, it was a brand new world. And we've explored that world and explored it and explored it and explored it and explored it, and we've come to a point where we've amassed an understanding of significant limitation, right? And it's like that's pushing us, it's fueling us, it's a propellant to go beyond those limitations and find answers and be creative. And so we know empirically that the universe is all there is, so let's turn to that all there is once and say, okay, I'm ready. Now let's go. It's real. Yeah. Now it's time for it to be real. And I think we can drop, in huge numbers of people very, very quickly, a lot of the childish sort of BS running around through the entire spiritual worlds and psychedelic worlds and everything else, just with that one move, because it's very real, because it. You're like, I just did something I can't change. From that point, I think the very first lesson we have to learn is patience. Everything comes to everybody in its own due time. Especially once you're open, we need patience, because people are like, no, I want it right now. And it's like, you're not ready right now. Mm-hmm. This game plays at a level of intricacy and synchronicity that would blow people's minds. People are thinking oh, that was synchronistic. It's like, no, every nanosecond is synchronistic, right? There is not one movement on the planet happening right now that's not connected to your movement. So move your hand in front of your eyes and look at that movement and understand that every car driving on the planet right now is moving at exactly the same time. Understand that every human being hangs 10 on the now. People are searching for the now. Dude, we live the now. No one has ever lived in the past or the future. It is a one-time expression of consciousness. There. We are already right there. We're not thinking it. We're not knowing it. We're not connected to it. It's not in our consciousness. We've put up I think of as an aberration of light in our vision to not see how the fact that we're already right there.
All of the consciousness, all of the healing, all of the love, all of the happiness, all of the fulfillment, we have it already.
It's already, including one single ancestry, including one human history, including every movement that every human being has ever made. I like to think of these things, I think of spreadsheets, and I think of Excel files, and I think of every category of human expression. And I see that there is a ticker ongoing of every footstep that a human being has ever stepped on the planet. And it's just increasing. And every breath everybody's ever taken, and every thought collectively we've ever had.
And that's part of the magic of it.
That is the magic.
We have these special tongues to drink this special coffee and this special delicious shake that I'm drinking now.
Absolutely.
That no other planet, no other time could ever experience exactly quite that. There's not going to be an environment to produce that. And that's why there's existence. Why is there all this? It's for all these experiences.
It's for all of the experiences.
For the whole gamut of all of it.
Yeah. And I think life's a miracle. It's we don't really know how we got here. These are the things that I really look for. I think let's start with what we really know and what we really don't know. One of the things we really don't know is how we really got here. Another thing we really don't know is how long we'll be here. And another thing we really don't know is how the universe was created. And another thing we really don't know is how long the universe will exist. Let's just start there. That book ended the entirety of our experience. Now we have a container to hold it all. Let's explore, right? Yeah. Let's get fired up on the exploration and see what we can do, because I think we've tapped less than 1% of human potential. I think everything that is this magnificent existence we have right now is less than 1% of what we can do. And the next evolution is going to be in consciousness. And we're going to see that we're a bridge, literally a living bridge of dimension, and that we can extend. And so many of us already know this, that we can tap all of these different dimensions that have all of these different technologies and understandings in them, and these incredible capacities to explain and understand and build and grow. And we can really answer a lot of the problems that humanity is facing on the planet right now.
I think you're absolutely right, but I also think we shouldn't discredit the stage that we're in, because the stage that we're in is also a unique and beautiful stage.
Sure.
We reach these states of higher consciousness. Some parts of the spectrum are going to go away. These things that we get to do now will become too much like that controlled folly that the Toltecs talk of. It'll just become a little too silly to really fully engage in them and enjoy them the way that we do. I mean, right now we have a full emotional spectrum, of everything from deep sorrow to deep bliss and I know that consciousness will yield amazing gifts and general ease of suffering and be a probably overall a more enjoyable state, but let's enjoy this one too, because it's wild and fucking crazy, and we get to do stuff that at this higher level of consciousness, it won't exactly ever be like this again.
Definitely won't be like this again. But I think that, I've started to reverse my direction of understanding, and that I thought of higher consciousness as up and out and expansion in that direction. And I really see it as an expansion inward. And I don't see any reason why we can't keep all that stuff. I think we can literally have both. We can have all the fun, all the joy, all the sorrow, all the experience, and a container that holds it in a way that we don't have to get super freaky about it. It doesn't have to translate to like putting holes through people and spilling blood over the fact that we feel really bad that day. Right. So I think that, I don't really ascribe to the system of thought that we lose our humanity by reaching higher states of consciousness. I think that we become much more human reaching higher states of consciousness, because human already is this incredible love within us that is a medicine for everything, a tremendous amount of knowledge and wisdom, and the physicality. And so I only see that in the merging of all of those pieces into a cohesive expression of what we already have is what allows the opening of the doorways. And that's something I always loved about ayahuasca work, is that there's no room for sanctimosity in it, because when you're face deep in a puke bucket and that puke bucket bottom goes for eternity and you see that you're puking straight through hundreds of dimensions and they're all rainbow light, it gives you a whole new perspective. But you're still in the bucket though, right? That your jaws have unhinged and the great universe is pouring out of you right into that bucket, but you're still vomiting, right?
Yeah.
So it's
I mean, do you think, I'm with you 100%, and I'm plowing full steam ahead, no regrets, nothing in my rear view. But do you think 50 Shades of Grey exists in higher consciousness? Does kinky sex exist in a higher consciousness? I mean, I think we'll probably do away with some of these things that are kind of interesting now, that are just going to be I can't, spanking you is not going to really, it's not going to really feel good anymore, Hamilton. We're going to lose a little something.
I think we might lose a little something along the way. That's fair. And, I think that, why not? Why not?
It's okay. I mean,
why not enjoy it now? But I mean, don't we really think though that where we are now in consciously, drop all the high and mighty, where we are right now are micro steps learning to deal with the human psyche.
Yeah.
Right? It's micro steps. I think we can enjoy all of those micro steps. At the same time, I think that there's some situations happening collectively that doesn't allow people to enjoy some of those micro steps, and we can support it.
Yeah, massive.
We can support that, right? Mm-hmm. We can definitely support that. So individually, definitely, I don't see any reason why pleasure can't be part of the whole experience.
It has to be.
It has to be.
And it will be.
It has
for
to
sure.
be. But, also in the greater collectives, maybe it would be okay for everybody to get to eat. right? Like, just put it out there. Like, maybe it would be okay. Like, is it possible that it would be okay that, and not to take away the experiences of hunger, right? Like, that has purpose too, and everything. And Buddha walking through fields of lepers have purpose and everything like that. And it all has purpose just the way that it is. And you can say that it's all uniquely perfect in every single moment, and it's also uniquely changing in every moment. And, you know, I think that we need to get away though from that mindset that we get to pre-create what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't get to pre-create what it's going to get to look like. You're always standing on the precipice of the unknown. And it's the openness and the receptivity and the love that we can bring to it, or the higher state of consciousness we can bring to it, that starts to give it a direction.
One of the things that, the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is we've been living largely unconsciously for so long and procreating largely unconsciously for so long that our population growth has been really unconsciously played out on a global level. Is there any, concern in your mind that we might have, we might be a little bit too far behind the 8 ball, and that these forces are just going to keep playing out, and there's going to be just too many people for the resources, too much mass unconsciousness to make the shift, that there's just the sheer abundance of humans that are out there are going to be too hard to change and reach that higher state?
I would have said yes years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now I wouldn't. There's one aspect to this whole game that we never really give a lot of voice to, which is human ingenuity. And I would like to see an evolution of the way we operate collectively. And I think if we become more philanthropic in our nature, and to realize that the real efficiency of that philanthropy, really looking out for each other, really does create a capacity to have a more efficient model, that the use of our resource and the use of technology and everything could sustain a much larger population than we think of. The other thing I always think too, especially if we look at history, is don't count Earth out. We need to make friends with Earth real fast.
Oh yeah,
real fast, because Earth resets the clock everywhere,
theme.
Right?
Common
Earth
theme
resets the clock, and so let's make friends with Earth. Right. And I think the very first step to do that is to recognize that there is literally no separation between your physical body and Earth. You're made of Earth, you die as Earth, and you're connected to it the whole time, even when you're flying in an airplane. And I like to think of outer space, because when you're inside space and on Earth, it's a little harder to like get the full perspective, because the vision becomes really fragmented. But when you're like, if you think of like an astronaut looking at space, and then you think of the amount of actual space in total outer space that's, inhabitable for people, it's this tiny little like orange peel. It's like tiny, right? It's really, really, really tiny. And, we need to make friends with that. We need to make really good friends with that.
It's a really important point that you made. And, everybody knows the law that matter cannot be created or destroyed from nothing. Well, so far for now, maybe there's some other rules there. But in general, as far as the physical laws, that's the truth. And then, but people think about growing. Okay, we grow bigger. We add more cells to our body, add more matter. Well, where does that come from? Well, that comes from us eating stuff.
Right.
Okay. And then where does the stuff that we eat, where does that come from? Well, that comes from, generally, it all goes back to plants. At some point, something we're eating ate some plants, on down the food chain.
Yeah.
All right. Now, where are the plants getting their cells from? Oh, the plants are getting their cells from the soil and the water that's coming from. Oh, yeah. So really, at the bottom, we are actually literally made of earth. We are walking Earth.
You're walking Earth. Absolutely.
And we think of, there's people and then there's Earth and then there's animals and then there's blah, blah. No, we're all fucking Earth.
We need to start thinking collectively at like the most primal level. We're Earth. Yeah, and we're big enough now at 7-8 billion, whatever the population is. And I don't know how we even keep track, because babies are coming everywhere. Right. So like I see babies everywhere. So it's like, there's just a whole lot more of us cruising, right? On the flight here, there were babies, like there's babies everywhere. So like, that is enough of one collective, like one huge collective of a species, to need to understand that we're Earth.
Yeah.
Not separate from Earth anymore. And that's where I go to like the evolution of human ingenuity and consciousness, because we don't know what it could really look like. We only know what this evolution of consciousness over the last, 5, 6, 7,000 years looks like. It's sort of birth of the beginning stages of a greater collective in modern civilization, and then, the expansion and expression of that globally. We come to understand that we're Earth. We come to understand that we have a balanced relationship with Earth. We start to revere Earth, and we start to revere our bodies as part of Earth, and we start to really, come into balance with a more collective global expression. I think that can balance itself. I don't see any reason why it can't balance itself. One thing that is clear, really, really clear to me, like really clear, is that human behavior is programmed from baby. Babies have no idea what they're doing in terms of like how to be an adult human being. And so we have tremendous latitude to be able to change the shape and nature of how we work.
The Toltecs call that the mitote, the dream of the world that shapes us into what we believe is right or wrong.
And then we think we're that thing, right? Because we've been thinged. We've had enough thing thrown at us that we have become thinged instead of this, sort of mercurial expression of a being on Earth. That real identification with human being as your consciousness expands gets diluted in certain ways, and you start to really feel like you're part of the Earth, and you start to really feel like you're part of the universe, and you start to really feel like your body is a system that is in balance and harmony with the different rhythms. And that, if we had that merging of sort of modern knowledge and ancient knowledge and understanding and balance together, I think you could see tremendous growth economically. I think you could see tremendous growth in terms of social stability. I think we could see a tremendous reduction in crime, and a greater allocation of resources.
It's hard to do crime when you're realizing you're perpetrating crime on yourself.
It's a lot harder, and it's a lot harder.
It's a lot less fun to steal from another version of you.
Yeah, and I've lived in places where there's a tremendous amount of crime in the form of theft and stuff like that, and it really is comparative competition, poverty driven.
Yeah, scarcity thing.
It's scarcity, and I'm going to get me mine, and it's scarcity, and then more scarcity and more scarcity. I think, again, there's a lot more efficiency. And if we look at resource use, if it's all about efficiency.
Yeah.
Right? That here with On It. It's all about efficiency. And so if we can reduce the amount of loss, and we can reduce the amount of redundancy, and we can reduce the amount of friction, you're going to gain a tremendous amount of growth. We don't know ultimately what the potential of that would be, but that's what if I channel the Earth, that's what the Earth tells me. Like I spend a lot of time like hanging with Earth.
Yeah, likewise. And the Earth always tells me, the Earth consistently in a variety of different medicines says the same thing. It said, Aubrey, focus on consciousness. I'll take care of the rest.
Correct. That's how I see it too. And I think that, with the work that I'm doing around consciousness now and the expansion that we're going to make this year in the Blue Morpho Foundation, we're going to be able to start to actually scientifically and empirically prove these things that we're talking about.
Beautiful. I can't wait. Well, you ready for some more people to show up at Blue Morpho?
It'd be great.
Because it's going to happen.
We're always ready.
Tell people where to go. Tell people how to find you. We'll wrap this thing up.
BlueMorphoTours.com for Peru, and BlueMorphoFoundation.org for our charity work here in the States. And to participate, you just need to be open and ready to have some really incredible evolution, because that's what we're all about, just evolving human consciousness and really taking it to that next level for your own well-being and then a collective well-being.
Indeed. Well, Hamilton, I'm going to call this part 1 because I know that we're going to do this again at some point. So
great.
I appreciate having you out here, and I'm looking forward to spending a couple of days here in Austin.
Thank you so much for letting me be here, and pleasure to meet you guys, and kudos to all the work you're doing.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. All right. Much love, everyone. We will talk to you soon. Peace.